And that is where we get into one of the key drivers of all of the economics here, is given that we have the ability to produce much more electrical energy than the UK can absorb, one of the key drivers of value will be European demand for this power and the price level at which Europe is willing to pay for this power. Now, we've run our numbers on a number of different scenarios. Some of those suggest that the valuation is strongly positive. If you believe that European demand and price levels will be particularly low, then we may only want to develop up until the point at which we have enough electrical power for the UK. Variability. The three main challenges in terms of variability in 2050: supply uncertainty, peak reliability, and grid congestion. All of those can be addressed by a portfolio of measures that might include backup generation, storage, interconnection, better forecasting, and also a range of smart grid technologies. We think that putting all of those together should enable the UK by 2050 to manage around 50% variable renewables on the UK grid. That is, we could generate 300 terawatt hours of power through onshore and offshore variable renewables and manage that within the UK grid mix. We didn't take a view on what the other 50% might look like. We'll leave somebody else to look at that. In terms of grid connections, the picture you see on the right-hand side here shows potential grid connections for the round 3 sites, allowing for export and interconnection with Europe. Under our 50% UK demand scenario, we think 21 gigawatts of grid connection could be required. Now, that's not for net exports, as I mentioned, but as purely to provide balancing and backup and storage services. That could equally be provided onshore in the UK with UK backup, with UK storage. But we think it's likely that at least some of that backup and storage we would want to source from the continent. Okay. So very quickly on the other two scenarios, under the net electricity exporter, we'd require around 100 gigawatts of interconnection. And if we were to go the whole hog and do the net energy producer, we're talking about 340 gigawatts of interconnection.
Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. Can I say how delighted I am to be associated with this well-researched report by one of the world's renowned consulting groups. That is the Boston Consulting Group. My own company, Mainstream Renewable Power, were on the board, which was brilliantly led by Tim, and which produced this result very quickly. The report shows that UK energy supply exceeds demand and will basically lead to huge exports from this country. In the central scenario, 29% only of the wind resource is actually captured. That leads to the construction of 169 gigawatts, which will cost £443 billion to build and will lead to annual revenues of £62 billion. Now, these are based on the DEC central price of electricity scenario. Your take on the future depends on the assumptions that you use, so you just have to be reasonable, and I think this report has actually been very reasonable. Europe is in the throes of decarbonising its electricity supply. By law, all the countries of Europe have to take our total renewables contribution to 34% of electricity by 2020. That's by law. We have been in with Commissioner Piebalgs. He has spoken in favour of the complete decarbonisation of Europe by 2050. The renowned bureaucrat Chris Jones, who was Piebalgs' chief assistant, and ourselves discussed the most likely scenario for 2050, which is that Europe will make 50% of its electricity from wind by 2050, that it will make 30% of its electricity from solar, that it will make 10% from marine renewables that are not yet commercial, and that will make 10% probably from nuclear. This is actively being discussed, and this scenario which is the most likely one, I say, is being actively championed by the new Commissioner, Oettinger, a German. For me, the key in this report states that the round 3, which we're currently building or starting to build, and the 9 zones that have been awarded to various development groups in the UK waters, these must be supergrid compliant. That's a very key finding in this result. By doing this, we keep our options open. We allow Britain to become the exporter. This is the no regrets policy. The timing of this report is absolutely centrally important, because it can frame and should frame the policy, the energy policy for the new government, which has just come into being in the last few weeks. The report asks the government to take a leading role in the current EU negotiations on the supergrid. You know that there are 10 nations now combining, including Britain, seeing the best way to be able to build the supergrid. And it urges the government to continue with the supply chain. I myself have spoken at several events around this country, trying to get other industries locating and to gear up the local entrepreneurs to back this great offshore wind endeavour. And it urges the government as well to come up with new financing scenarios. This needs to become mainstream, if you like. This needs to become what the City of London sees as its primary task over the next number of years. So I'm delighted to be here. Thank you very much, Tim. This is a great report. I commend it to everybody.
So, as we move through to some of the final items of the analysis itself, really the valuation, the values that have been coming through, and what we can see is that the economic value of electricity sales that come out of this of these 3 scenarios is significant. We've got here the 3 scenarios presented that have come all the way through this. That if you're looking at a net present value, the first thing to say is that it's positive. That above and beyond paying for itself as an industry, above and beyond the co-benefits that we see in terms of added energy security, working towards our climate targets, there is net present value on top of that. So the 50% scenario supplying 50% of the UK's demand, giving us £17 billion of net present value. Electricity exporter 36, and the net energy producer 55. To give you a sense of the kind of scale of investment that we're looking at, and I would like to frame it as the scale of the investment opportunity that we see with these. These 3 scenarios are looking respectively at in the order of £170 billion of investment for scenario 1, £443 billion for scenario 2, and close on £1 trillion of investment for scenario 3. And I say an opportunity because we need to keep in context, keep in mind the revenues that will flow from this. And this is looking long term into the future. This is couched in the uncertainties of future electricity prices. We've been using in these numbers and the central DEC price scenarios. So in terms of revenues, those 3 scenarios would be looking at bringing revenues of 28 billion a year, 62 billion, and 164. Now, looking so far into the future, and being conscious of the uncertainties that go with it, of the cost of technologies and of the price of electricity so far into the future, I think we've been using DEC price scenarios as a way of giving us a handle on this, and if you like, a common set of numbers to do so. These numbers have been off the central price scenario. DEC has, as well as its central one, a lower and a higher, and even a high scenario. And the price scenarios have come about, in large part they're informed by fossil fuel price projections and by carbon price projections. And the reason that we have a high price scenario in the first place is because fossil fuel prices started, the reality of them on the ground started bumping into the top of high fossil fuel price projections. So the point I'm trying to make here is that I'd like to think the numbers that come out of this report are, from my view, conservative in that we we may see, with fossil fuel constraints in the midterm, very high energy prices. And I think once we get out into the very long term and looking at a